You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Welcome, everybody, to Convenience Matters. My name is John Eichberger with the Fuels Institute and NACS. I'm here with my colleague,
Donovan Woods, also with the Fuels Institute and NACS.
You know, Donovan, I'm excited about today's program. We're going to be talking about low-carbon fuel standards, policies that are designed to reduce emissions, address carbon emissions, and the Fuels Institute released a report called The Market Reaction to Low-Carbon Fuel Standards. We're talking to Alex Marcucci, Trinity Consultants, who helped write the report today, and we're really looking forward to diving into this one.
Well, Alex, thanks for coming on to Convenience Matters. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
So, Alex, you guys, Trinity Consultants, recently did a study for the Fuels Institute. We asked you guys to take a look at how the markets reacted to low-carbon fuel standards, really looking at the California experience. A lot of our listeners probably have no idea what a low-carbon fuel standard is. Can you kind of give us an overview of what type of program we're talking about here?
Yes, absolutely. The California Low Carbon Fuel Standard has been around since 2011, really, but the California Air Resources Board started working on it back when I was in grad school, which would be 2008. The regulation itself is really based on the concept of, avoiding climate change. So the easiest way to think of it is it requires petroleum fuel producers to reduce their carbon footprint. And the carbon footprint is really measured in terms of carbon intensity of the fuel. And carbon intensity is the measure that is really based on a life cycle analysis. So it really looks at, greenhouse gas emissions from well to wheels is what we call it. So from the point the fuel is extracted to the point it is used in the vehicle. So the regulation requires petroleum fuel producers to reduce their carbon intensity by a certain percentage each year. And currently the regulation goes out all the way to 2030. What effectively that means is that these producers have to blend alternative fuels now to comply with this regulation, given that ethanol, biodiesel, and all of our alternative fuels that we use in California typically have a much lower carbon intensity than gasoline and diesel fuels. So the blending helps with compliance. That's one of the ways. And the other way is really to purchase credits on the LCFS credit market, which also has a price. So that would be my way of kind of. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in California, obviously, they pride themselves on being very progressive on environmental policies to kind of lead both the nation and, quite frankly, a lot of the world in terms of how they're addressing emissions and environmental issues. But we're starting to see discussions of similar programs pop up in other areas: Oregon, Washington, some Canadian provinces, the Midwest region, the Northeast. Where do you see the potential for a program like this possibly growing, and what should we be watching for as those discussions proceed?
Yeah, well, we already have a similar program in the state of Oregon. It's called the Clean Fuels Program, which essentially mirrors the California LCFS. The Oregon LCFS program became effective in 2015, compliance in 2016, I believe, so it's about 5 years behind the California version. The state of Washington has tried just recently to pass another LCFS regulation in their legislature, but it died, so the bill didn't get passed through one of the committees. This year, they're already looking into another version of the bill in the state of Washington, as well as Puget Sound area for their regional requirement as well. So there are already states definitely eyeing this process. And we also have Canada, our neighbor, who has considered a national LCFS program. While they already do have a couple of low carbon fuel programs in place in I believe British Columbia and Quebec. So, it's definitely been something that the whole world, I would say, is watching, this California experiment, because there's so many interesting kind of implications on the overall fuel market, and not just in one state. It's really a push and pull scenario, so it really impacts the national market as well as the world market, because a lot of these alternative fuels are produced elsewhere. and not even in the U.S.
So is this something from a consumer standpoint, or for our listeners who may be a retail fuel station owner, when they think about this, are there implications for the retailer as well as the consumer from what your findings were?
Yes, so I think those implications are maybe a little bit more indirect. There are impacts in terms of fuel prices, of course, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. Those prices are really something that get passed through to the consumers, but the fuel retailer may see those price spikes, and just understanding what those spikes are and how to stay competitive in the retailer market is going to be pretty vital. There are other regulations that are piling up on top of LCFS in California. There's cap and trade, and there's a few others. Of course, we have our gas tax as well. So if you look at their itemized invoice, there's going to be a lot of fees and taxes that the retailer will see when purchasing at the truck rack, that have to be taken into account when pricing the fuels to the consumers. There are other impacts with handling some of the alternative fuels that are now entering the fuel stream. So one of the concerns has been the increased biodiesel, which goes up to B20 in California pretty commonly, especially at truck stops and for heavy-duty vehicles. It's not uncommon to see a blend up to B20 now. So there are some distribution issues and storage issues that need to be considered when handling fuel with a higher alternative fuel content as well.
One of the reasons that we asked you guys to look at this study is not only the spread to regions, but as you mentioned, Canada's looking at a national one. I anticipate that we could see some federal proposals for a federal LCFS. And from the report you guys wrote, there's some potential support for that type of program. What I got from the report was those who are operating in the market have concerns that the credit program is not as robust as it could be. There's not enough trading partners to really make it transparent and fluid to support the market. So they are interested in additional trading partners, but they are concerned that if more programs develop, then we start running into competition for these compliant fuels, which raises prices. But then on the other side, there's a concern that, as you mentioned, Alex, we are sending low CI, low carbon intensity fuels from different regions to California for compliance, which does lead to an increase in transportation emissions associated with moving this. So the shuffling of low CI fuels, all those things kind of are percolating in terms of, should we expand it? Should we not expand? I mean, what did you guys see?
Yes, that's a very good point. It's again, there are some positives and negatives with that. So as other programs come online, we expect them to compete for those low CI fuels, such that the fuel supply in a given state would be an issue. In order to make an LCFS program successful, you got to have the volume of alternative fuels really available for compliance.
One of the lessons that I think any other entity that's looking at a low carbon fuel standard needs to pay attention to is, we used California as a case study, and we think about how it's evolved over time. So first regulations went into place in 2009, and then we had an amendment in 2011, an amendment in 2015. We have another amendment pending that was proposed last year. And when we start thinking about, you have a target to reduce carbon intensity by certain percentages each year, and the regulators try to anticipate what the market might do to satisfy that. And when I look at the data you guys provided us, and it's coming directly from the California regulators, the projections for what fuels are going to satisfy the program have changed dramatically over time. Is that something that we can learn from, or something we might be able to mitigate going forward?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just to give you an example, back in 2009, before the program began, California Air Resources Board, who is the main regulatory agency in California when it comes to air quality and emissions, they projected that compliance with low carbon fuel standard will be met mostly with I guess we call it renewable ethanol, really low CI ethanol. It's going to be what they thought is going to occur is all of this very advanced low CI, low carbon intensity ethanol would be available from things like wood chips and, cellulosic ethanol and things that were very advanced and were really futuristic back then. They did think that these things will come to fruition come 2020. However, when the regulation was revised first time, in 2011 and then in 2015, the predictions really have changed. And so the agency realized that there's not going to be that much low CI ethanol available. And it's really, 5 years into the program is really the minuscule volumes, if any at all. So they started looking into other ways. They really saw renewable diesel and renewable gasoline as possibilities of, again, achieving compliance come 2020. Well, while renewable diesel volumes did come to California, most recently, especially in the last 2-3 years, there's been a big influx of renewable diesel. Basically, all of the, California is sucking up most of renewable diesel available that they can get their hands on because it has so many cost benefits as well as, compliance benefits. Really, in 2015, they projected that renewable diesel, as I mentioned, will be available, and also sugar ethanol from Brazil will be coming in. Well, then come 2018, again, the agency saw that sugar ethanol and renewable gasoline were really not coming to the state, so they have to revise the forecast one more time. And that's really what we see with this regulation, is that as things change and as market evolves, the agency goes through and then modifies their assumptions and kind of looking into compliance into the future, which is a huge impact or has a huge impact on how the market behaves, because that gives regulated parties certainty on what's going to happen and, what kind of behaviors they need to do now to meet these requirements. Basically, the focus in 2018 is really on electricity. Some also renewable diesel, but electricity and renewable natural gas as well. So it's very, very different. We started off with, low CI ethanol. Then they saw there will be starch ethanol, so which is sugar ethanol, basically. Sugar ethanol. And then now they're putting all their bets on electricity and renewable natural gas. So it's definitely a changing picture. And this is what we really think is going to happen in the future. We think if things don't come to realize as the agency has planned and the market is changing, the agency will come in again in about 2-3 years and revise the regulation to make sure that the market stays solid and things are, have more certainty going forward when it comes to predictions like these.
And, Donovan, one of the good things about that is the regulators being responsive to the market.
Correct.
They're trying to adjust the program to allow the market to develop. But if you're an operator, you're looking at going, man,
it's a lot of costs.
A lot of uncertainty. Right.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. And that's, one thing I think some do appreciate about the agency doing this is because, they want this program to succeed. I mean, a lot of folks have their stakes into this program and compliance with this program. A lot of credits have been purchased. A lot has been stored. There's, I think generally in the industry, there is this feeling of, we need this to work. There's also many like alternative fuel producers or, other parties up and down the supply chain, like blenders, who have found their placement within the program. I think it works for them. There's definitely that desire to succeed. So they do appreciate when the agency sees how the market is changing, goes in and tailors the regulations such that it works in the present, right? Because you can't really predict the future. And that's one of the lessons we really learned is how changing the fuel market is right now, right? How unpredictable it is. And having that flexibility, I think definitely, it's kind of a double-edged sword where you have the little bit of the uncertainty, but at the same time, you see that the agency is flexible enough to work with the industry, to work and make this regulation work for everyone. So I think that is definitely a positive.
So I think you mentioned the positives, and I think if you go back all the way to the beginning, the goal was to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases, and that helps humans, it helps people, it helps the planet, correct? But sometimes we say that word, and I know John hates to say it, but why don't we just do this? just doing something always has a lot more entailed. And I do respect that the regulators are continuing to adjust, but as those looking from the outside looking in, are there things that they can learn to not have to do when they start this? Or how is it just state by state, region by region that would be different? What can you say would be something to really take hold of and really focus on when making that decision?
In terms of compliance?
Compliance, correct. Trying to actually roll it out when your region, is that something that you're thinking about? Because everyone wants clean air, but it's not always the easiest thing to do in this particular aspect.
Yeah, I think it really depends where you're at within the supply chain, the fuel supply chain. So it's, for retailers, I think there's really not much they can do other than just be flexible and understand what the changes that are all coming. It's really going to get to be up to date and understand where, for example, if you're in a state where you do have this program in place, understand what the reasons are, right? And I think you started the question with saying this is all about climate change, right? So understanding your legislature that's being proposed in your state, following all of that, I think is very useful because you'll see where you may be able to predict where you will end up in 5, 10, 20 years from now. I mean, there are very interesting things. In California, for example, a conventional or internal combustion engine vehicle ban has been proposed in California legislature. It died, but it's going to be back, and I hear it's already back, and there's going to be another proposal on the table. So there are these big picture things that happen that all have an impact, and how your really business is going to do in the future. I mean, if they ban all petroleum vehicles, right, vehicles that use gas and diesel, there goes your business. So either you done or you adapt. You adapt and you look into putting chargers into your stations. You look into, look at natural gas. So there's definitely ways, but I think my kind of recommendation is to really stay up on all of these activities because they're all related. It's not just California Resources Board. There's definitely a lot of other agencies. California Energy Commission has a set of regulations. There's air districts that have their own rules. There's AB 617 now on the table that requires some regional monitoring, and retailers are definitely also impacted by that. So just really maybe join, an association that will help you be part of this or, read up on the news. I think that was all very useful.
I think a lot of the people who would be classified as opponents to the low carbon fuel standard, they point to the regulatory compliance burden, the cost of compliance, the cost to consumers. When I look at the report you guys put together through 2017 and the stakeholders you interviewed, it hasn't really been that big of a burden. Compliance has not been too burdensome. It's obviously more burdensome for smaller operators. Cost to consumers, I think your data says less than 5 cents per gallon for gasoline and diesel for compliance through 2017. But that's also not even half of the GHG emission reductions in the program. We start looking at 2030. Things might get a little more exciting, might they?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think it's a very good point to say that, at the time of the report preparation, we really only had hard data through 2017, and we needed to have a full year of data to make sure we can do all the other comparative analysis properly. Well, now we obviously have data for 2018, now 2019 is coming out. Usually the industry uses Opus or Argus for pricing, and those are very useful systems as well to understand what that premium is on a given gallon of alternative fuel or a given gallon of gasoline or diesel in California or other states. So the spot market reports are really, really useful. What we have seen, and those are the sources we use for our the report. What we have seen in as recent as I think the last time I looked at it was December 2018, but I'm sure they have more recent data now. But the impacts are definitely much more significant. So there's really two things that impact the fuel price increases or those fees that are tacked on per gallon of fuel. There is the credit price itself. So the credit price is dictated by the demand, supply and demand on the market. And back in 2017, maybe it was, I forget, let's say it was $100 per metric ton of GHG emissions. Now it's closer to 200. So you really see, you're doubling that already from what we were saying about 2017 and those price premiums. And now you're also having a more stringent standard. So there's, I mentioned it's twofold. You have the credit price, and then you have the standard stringency that impact the price premiums and that price per gallon. So in 2018, we have seen price increases for gasoline about 14 cents per gallon. I'm just looking at the data that I have. And then for diesel, I think it's about 11 cents per gallon. So there's definitely, it's already doubling, right, that 5 cents that we put in the report. And we expect that number will definitely be higher and higher as the stringents get, as the standards get much stringent, and as really the credit prices will go up in the future, as the supply goes down and more parties will need to purchase these credits on the market. So it's definitely, again, a push and pull.
Those are the lessons that we gotta hope people are paying attention to, is the program elements and the prices.
So if any key takeaways from this is, again, everyone wants clean air, but as a retailer, we cannot keep our heads in the sand. We have to be aware. We have to talk to other operators, be involved, because change is coming. But one way we can be involved is being aware and being informed. And feel free to download this report from the Fuels Institute, Market Reactions to Low Carbon Fuel Standard Programs. You can find that at fuelsinstitute.org.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.